Hey, y'all. Hey, welcome to the PowerWomen podcast.
This is a show where powerful women share their journeys, discuss powerful issues, and the men and women who help us rise.
And we are your hosts with three very different backgrounds and very different perspectives. I'm Brandy Jo Newman.
I'm Gayatri Agnew.
And I'm your power mom, Claire Brown. Hey, y'all. Hey, we are back again. Gayatri's with us. Hey, girl.
Hey, girl. Hey, I'm back.
Hey, I know. I'm so excited. I always love it when you're on. And so you brought a friend this time. I love it when we play in the sandbox. So who do we have?
I brought a buddy. So I not only brought one of the most brilliant humans that I know, but I also brought one of my dearest friends and one of the kindest humans that I know. And I love when all those qualities get rolled up inside a single soul. So Katie
I love it
Robert,
when you talk about me like that. Yes.
I know.
But
Well,
who
Claire,
else do we have?
I talk about you similarly. I have different adjectives for you. We can do that. We could do that at another time, but you are brilliant and lovely.
No teasing.
Yeah. And level of sass off the charts. Katie also, in the right setting, reaches the same. But I have brought my dear friend Katie Roberts, who I first met when Katie was part of the corporate communications team here at Walmart and moved to Bentonville, Arkansas, where she and I became very, very fast friends for the brief period of time that she lived here. But Katie has been not just a dear friend to me, but actually an incredible mentor in my own leadership journey. And so it felt like an absolutely appropriate person to bring onto this podcast to talk to her about her journey, and also to have her share with us some fun things that are happening in her life. But Katie, can you just share with our guests, like, who are you? Who is Katie Roberts?
Oh, fantastic. Well, ladies, thank you so much for having me today. It's just great to see you all. So basically, I'm a New Yorker, born and bred in New York City. We're rare, but I have basically, spent the last 24 years. Wow. So I started off my career in politics. And I then moved to working in the federal government. I was the press secretary for the Department of Veterans Affairs. And then I deployed to Afghanistan. And as a civilian, a DoD civilian, worked in DoD. And then since about 2014, I've been in the private sector and worked for companies like GE, Walmart, WPP, and back in defense, SDIC and Booz Allen. But now I'm starting my own thing. So
yes, ma'am.
Exciting. Yeah. And a little bit, I guess, it's so funny. We always go to the professional, right? We should go personal. Personal, avid runner, dog lover, and just world traveler.
Love that, Katie. Thank you for bringing her in my space, Gayatri.
I know.
Yes.
I mean, we love a good story of entrepreneurship, Katie. So we're going to dig in on that. But I have to say, one of the things that I adore about you is the stories and the lived experience that you bring from there's not another way to say this, from being a badass woman in a man's world, particularly some of your earlier career work, your political work, your deployment, your work at Veterans Affairs. Can you just jump right in and give us a little bit of what was some of that like for you, and how, as a woman who now is a successful, powerful, strategic woman, but as you were getting started in your career, what was that like? And who helped you, who supported you, who mentored you?
Well, I have to say, men candidly have made my career. It's the male leaders that I've worked for that have really helped guide me, pull me along, put me in positions where I was like, I'm not ready for that. And they're like, yes, you are. Go. I'm like, okay. I think, there's not one thing, right, is we all think that we have to have this specific path and we have to take this job or we have to do that. You don't have to do anything, right? You can follow good people and do good work. And that's what I did. And it allowed me, yes, I've moved 34 times in my life.
Wow.
but I've gotten to work in places like Guam, Alaska, New Mexico, South Carolina, Afghanistan, London. So, you follow good people, you network, you keep your ear to the ground. But going back, I think I'll end that question in terms of working with men, and that you have an opportunity to also understand, for me personally, right? The male leaders I worked for really tested me, and they tested me in a couple ways. One, I actually have to give a lot of credit. I worked for Governor Bill Richardson, who unfortunately has passed, but very interesting individual. Talk about sass. He's, but he taught me that it didn't matter, whether you're the most senior person on his staff or the most junior person. If you had an idea and you were able to, bring a cohesive argument and you stood your ground and you held your position, he'd listen to you. Mm-hmm. And he also, what I thought was wonderful is sometimes it can be very formal working for, elected leaders, and it can be just and he was not like that. He was a total jokester. And, what I loved was he would rib you, but it didn't matter if you were male, female, didn't matter. He would rib you the same. And I loved that. I could maybe use foul language with him, but I would always add it at the end or the beginning with a sir, XXX or XXX, sir, now let's go. Right.
Yes.
And he just respected that. And then I think there's other leaders, I would be remiss without mentioning Secretary Eric Shinseki. Truly, if you look up in Webster's dictionary, hero and leader, his name should be there. He was the Secretary of VA when I was the press secretary. And he actually candidly changed my life. He is the reason I left my political job and became a DoD civilian, because he was the epitome of a leader. He had sacrificed his family had actually been interned in our country. He had been injured in Vietnam, but he had this continued dedication to our country and to service. Had served as the Chief of Staff of the Army, and just I can't say enough good things. And really, he taught me that, first of all, empathy. He really did. He taught me empathy. I will say he is hands down the most empathetic leader I've worked for. Now,
male or female?
Male or female.
Wow.
And probably one of the most empathetic people I've ever met. And here you think, Vietnam War, 4-star general, right? All that. No. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because he held the decision of people's lives in his hand. Mm-hmm. And that just was, I will say, there's not a week I go by that I don't think, would Secretary Shinseki be proud, right? Mm-hmm. Would he say I did the right thing?
That's heavy.
That's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what it's been like working for men.
Well, I've said many times that power women will not succeed to their highest potential without the support and leverage of powerful men, and vice versa. Yeah. And if we don't give that credit, then who are we? And if they don't, in turn, who are they? And so I think it's extraordinarily important that we do have that conversation, and we do seek the support and the approval. And we open that conversation very transparently. And just like you say, would I make him proud? Just like we would our fathers in many ways, because there is that space that we always need to maintain, no matter where the pendulum goes.
And, but I also think there's opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. In terms of it's a new landscape. Mm-hmm. And, why I'm launching this women-owned and led business is because I want to change that narrative, right? Because look, there just weren't that many women, right? And they weren't there. So now that women are in positions of power, they're on boards, they are CEOs. For example, excuse me, the woman who at SCIC, the CEO, she's an African-American woman, one of the first women to run a defense contracting business. Huge, right? So the landscape has changed. And so part of what I want to do is, in starting this, small women-owned business called Include, is empower women and the future generations, right? So Gayatri, for your daughter, Kamala, she won't know that there's only, male dominated industries. She'll just be like, oh, what job do I want to go to? Right. And will I find female leaders? Will I find male leaders who support me? Right.
Yeah, that's real. Well, it's interesting, right? Because she's growing up here in Arkansas. So, while I may not agree with the politics of our governor, she does have a relatively young female governor leading our state. And then she looks at the federal level and sees not only our vice president, who is a woman, but also is her namesake. And so the other day she goes, Mom, I just can't decide if I want to be president or governor. Like, these are good problems to have, right? But because those are her models, and not for a moment does she question whether she can, because she's seen it, right? Versus had to create it. So Katie, I'm curious, you went back to that statement about moving 34 times and my heart skipped a beat. And I already know this about you because I know you personally, but why are you so brave? Because that's scary. That is, I have not moved nearly that many times. I went abroad once for a job. It was an amazing experience, but it was hard to be that brave. And I'm just curious, were you scared when you took on different assignments? And how did you just do it anyway?
Because I think, wait a minute. There's a difference in moving, because moving's an occupational hazard for me. However, moving to different states and then different countries is totally different. And that is where the fear is.
Yeah.
I think a big part of it in transparency is my parents died when I was young. They died when I was in my early 20s. And I was very close to my parents, and they loved to travel, loved it. And, they were both very go-getters in their career. My dad was a general counsel. My mom was ran the New York State Supreme Court system. And so, for me, it was okay, now I'm going to go get after it. They really gave me a drive inside of myself. And anytime I had an opportunity, and I always put myself, I always was the first person to raise my hand. You need me to go somewhere? What problem do you want me to solve? What team do you want me to join? And hence the opportunities came. And, I think it was, for me, actually, it was fear of not doing that and not taking the opportunity, right? And not seeing the world. And I will say part of it was also, I know that my parents had wanted to do so much more travel. And so I very much, felt okay, they're not here. I'm going to go do it and explore. And it was wonderful. Look, at times it was exhausting. I won't get you, I won't fib about that. But, there were times I was scared, but there was also, it was so exhilarating, right? And it allowed me to gain such skills that where even for example, in some situations, right, where I've had to be, again, the only woman, right, all men, all very challenging situations. I mean, put it this way, it wasn't easy in Afghanistan as the only woman. And I served as a strategic communications advisor to the operational commander. So very different, because it was the operational headquarters where the day-to-day war was being run. And, so you had to have some cojones. You really did, and so, so I think all the travel, whenever I need that strength, I just, there's this suitcase, right, of things. I can be, whatever, I remember when this happened or that happened, my house got broken into in Guam, all sorts of crazy things would happen. So I would always be able to say, well, it's not as bad as that. It's okay. I'm going to be fine. I'm just going to figure it out.
It's not as bad as Afghanistan. It's not as bad as Guam. It's just this. It's just that. And you talk about the fear, and I think, I've done a lot of breakthrough work on my fears, right? And one of my fears now is not reaching my highest potential. And so what if we all lived in that space, and then what would we accomplish if that were our driver, right? And so, because I don't think women especially look at it like that. And that's what you were tapping into, which is huge.
I love that, Claire. Because you know what? Guess what? I have that fear too of not living into my highest potential, right? And, look, I dragged my feet a little bit in terms of starting this company and leaning into it, because I've always worked for big organizations and big companies. And I was like, I can't be a small business owner. What am I trying to do? Right. And so it's good when we lean into those fears,
Yeah.
Katie, share more about that, because I think so many of our listeners, and I'll say maybe even myself included, right? Like, I do love the work that I do, and I one day see myself maybe like going out on my own, but there's so much about it that sounds terrifying, but you're doing it right now. You're actively launching this enterprise in partnership with others, but really like you're leading it. And what tipped in you, or what shifted in you that got you to a place where you felt ready to do that?
Gosh, great question. I think it goes back to, if I look back, right, 2022, I was sitting in a C-suite position. I was the chief people officer for the specialist communications portfolio, WPP, a $1 billion portfolio, right? I had made it, right? That was a big goal. And I kind of had a moment of like, well, now what? What do I do? Right. And I was working with great people, great mission, but there was a passion in me that just was, something's missing. And I knew for me, public-private partnerships is a passion, right? I've always had an affinity to, and a belief that government, can do good, right? Yes, there's lots of bureaucracy, there's good and bad everywhere, but I knew I wanted to get back to work that would allow me to be able to help contribute to our country in both the public sector and the private sector. So fast forward, and have had, great opportunity with several different companies. But then I have to say, it kept getting, the voice in me kept getting louder and louder when I would present ideas, and I would, try and punch, above something or through something and think very different and very outside of the box. And it was like this itch. It kept itching, right? And it kept itching. And I was like, I don't know how much more I can take. No. Right. Yeah. And then actually what flipped it for me, and good, bad, and different, this is the total truth, is people started to say to me, well, Katie, you have all this experience, but you don't know this little thing, and you haven't had this very technical experience. You haven't had 20 years. For example, part of our company is going to be starting a government contracting part of the business. And I kept getting people telling me, well, Katie, you don't know this about government contracting. You don't know that and this. And I said, okay, fine, people, I'm going to go learn that. So because I just was like, when somebody tells me I can't do something, I'm sure as hell going to go learn how to do it. Right. Because I just don't like that. So I just immersed myself. I would send myself up for training. I went to like 2 8-hour training sessions, maybe not the most interesting things, but they were wonderfully helpful. They were great. And I learned it. And then I was like, wait a minute. No. You can't tell me that that's because I don't know. And then I kind of was like, wow, like I should just start doing this myself. And I should just find women and other people that want to do it with me. And hence we're here.
Yeah.
And that's how it came.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's it. And that, I love that so much. And that's what holds so many people back in everything. It's like, no, you don't have this. You can't do that. Da, da, da. No, it's not. I may not, but I know someone who does.
Right.
And We are all, that's it. We can all be so empowered with just a phone call and a conversation. And so all you got to do is pick up the phone and make that one call, have that one conversation with someone else who has that one skill set that you need. Leverage them, implement them in your business, and that's it. And so it's like, I may not have it, but here's who does, and I've got them on my team. Thanks so much. Next.
Or you're brave enough. You're brave enough to make that phone call. Like that's, I think, because I know you both very well, and I know this about the both of you. You know enough to know what you don't know, right? And I think like that's so much a part of the breakthrough is that moment when you realize it's actually not about you being the expert at everything you do, right? You'll always have a core set of background experiences where you're just like able to know everything about everything on this set of topics or issues, but there's always going to be stuff you're asked to lead that you don't know about.
Yeah.
Hence
the reason Gayatri is here.
Exactly. But it's also, you know, like, look, ladies, I think one of the things, like, I actually think it's one of the greatest gifts that was given to me, right, was this experience of well, you don't have this and that. And it was actually one of the, why I say it's a gift is because one of the things was it was actually, they were giving me that feedback because I was saying, hey, this is what I know. I don't claim to know all these things.
Right.
And it was fantastic because a couple of people did say very specifically to me, well, Katie, you know, go get this if you knew this, right? And so I really appreciate that because I was very grounded. I'm like, hey, this is what I've got, right? This is what I know. And then I was realizing, okay, one of the shifts I did also realize is that the workforce and future of work is such that the pace of things is so fast, right? Tomorrow, you know, technology has already moved in another direction. And I think that one of the things that was actually very humbling for me is I thought I was a lifelong learner, right? I read a lot, I do all this. And I was like, wow, I actually need to check myself in that, no, I have to actually do these type of classes. I have to be more proactive, whether it's I take online, I think about, you know, for example, I'm going to sign up for, a coding class. Not that I need to be a coder because God bless, that would not be a good thing, but I need to understand it, right? And so that's where I think we all have to understand that learning has really changed because the reality is our skills, like, it's not, we're not going to get hired and we're not going to stay in jobs because of what we know today. It's because we're malleable. It's because we have an ability to learn and say, you know what, I don't know, but teach me and I'll jump in, right?
Can we go back? Because okay, good. Thank you. So you've had this career with all these incredibly high positions with surrounded by men, and you've been able to steadily climb. What's that secret? What's the sauce? Because I even had a conversation with a woman yesterday, and she's like, "I need help. I can't break through this, and I should have been promoted. And the dude that came in 6 months ago has already been promoted, and I'm not. And so, what is it?" Because you come across to me as very feminine. And so when I envision a woman going over to Afghanistan, it is not this genteel, feminine lady.
I think it starts with a couple things. First and foremost, you have to think a little bit and like a man, and you have to understand how they operate, right? And you have to get over it. It is not personal, and it is business. And you also have to understand that sometimes the attention span of frustration, like, we can harbor things for, years, right? They can harbor something for 5 minutes. Like they forget, right? Like, but I'm being a little bit cheeky, but it is important. I think fundamentally, I also had an advantage because I began in politics, right? My job was to get people elected. My job was to support and understand that it wasn't about us. It wasn't about the office, right? It wasn't about the campaign. It didn't matter. But my job was to say, okay, what does the voter need and want? What do they understand? And so I had that luxury of understanding immediately that how my progression and how I was going to do well was it was never about me. It was understanding my audience, right? So whether my audience was a boss, it was, a political candidate or, a community, what have you. So it really always allowed me to protect myself because okay, this is not about Katie Roberts. This is about that individual and how am I enabling their success and what they need to get done. And there were times where, for example, again, I will say one of the things I actually loved about working for the military, and which I still, is you can be extremely effective at your job. And you could no more want to go have a beer with that person or a drink or a coffee or whatever 5 minutes after you are leaving the office. But you can be wildly successful.
Yeah.
And because you take that separation and you get laser focused. Okay, so-and-so is really good at X, Y, and Z. Here are their 3 things that just do not work well for them. And I actually, one of the things that I did do, which I did early in my career, because I knew I wanted to get places, but I knew that I couldn't allow fear or weakness, right? I couldn't be believe you me, I hightailed it many a time into a bathroom or whatever and cried but I would never show it. I would always, but was where I understood, I leaned into it. If somebody was particularly didn't like me or didn't want to work with me or didn't, I was I'm going to work on that. I'm going to get that. I'm going to make that my ally. Right. And that's where I think it's kind of gamification, right? That's how I did it. I totally I knew on my teams, right? I knew who was the alpha, who was this. And I just understood, okay, how do I map it where I knew my relationships had to be? And candidly, there were some that I just steered clear of.
Sure.
But it just, I think you had to, in the hardest times dealing with, challenging male situations, I always tried to make it a little bit of a game. And I always tried to say, okay, how do because sometimes you need levity, right? And you just have to kind of laugh at it because you're really? And also, this is the last thing I'll say on this, and I probably shouldn't, and I'm not proud of this, but
you should.
Yes, tell us all of it now.
I don't have an ego. If getting the job done means being dumb and being the dumb girl, I don't know how to do that. Do you know how to do that? Could you help me? I don't care. Fine. Done. Next.
I've learned that from my dad's 4th wife. She just sits there and goes, oh, wow. No.
That's brilliant.
Fabulous communication.
But I do have to say, I'm going to add 2 things. And Katie and I had only worked together for a relatively short period, but there's something I really noticed about you in that time that stuck with me. And now you see it, I think, more pushed forward, particularly for women, particularly in a corporate setting as advice. But Katie, in a meeting or in a conversation, would always be the first to be like, oh, we need a strategic working group on that. I'll lead that. Oh, somebody needs to bring snacks. Katie's hand is not going up, right? I feel like you had, no, for real. I feel like you had a really firm grasp on in every environment, there are folks that work too hard for their own good. And there are folks that step up and lead, and working hard isn't the same as leadership. And for better or worse,
say that again, Gayatri.
I said working hard is not the same thing as leadership. Right. And so you hear a lot now the term of the office housework. And there's a caution to women to not don't be the one that offers to get the lunch, clean up from the lunch, prepare the, whatever else. And it's, I think for many of us, myself included, the desire to do that comes from a really beautiful, lovely, caring place.
Sure.
But the thing is, at the end of the day, there's only so much time, there's only so much capacity, and there's only so many tasks to go around. Right. And I just, the pattern I see repeated by so many talented women is working hard at the expense of growing their own leadership, because there is that fear of, what if I do take on that really hard challenge and I fail? Okay. That's real fear. But also, what if I take it on and then I get myself really smart and I call the people I need to call to get right, like Katie, just the way you were describing, to have the tools I need to accomplish that, and I'm wildly successful. But I think that constraint, that self-imposed constraint, where women sometimes don't lean in all the way to that project and just sort of sit back and go, I'm working really hard, someone should notice. And because I'm working hard, someone should decide to promote me, right?
That's
Versus
it.
let me demonstrate my leadership, and then you will really have no choice but to elevate
That's
me.
And if I may, I would be remiss in that I've had three fantastic female bosses that, again, I was with them for a short amount of time, but really impacted me. First was actually I even remember her name. This was back when I was in college. Her name was Rachel McLean. She was the first national women's officer for the Labor Party when Tony Blair was in power, and she was fantastic. She actually, on the first day of my internship, I was not yet 21, and she takes me out, right? And this is back in the 90s, and she's like, "Oh, we're going to go to the pub," and we go to the pub, and she's like, "Well, what do you want to drink?" I'm like, "Oh, water's fine." She's like, "You're not drinking water. You're having a beer." And I'm like, and I was like, I didn't, right? And so I had a cider. Let's just say, because cider is, right? And I was just, note to self, I was like, totally for the rest of the day. But I know, crazy, right? And then also at VA, my immediate boss was Senator Tammy Duckworth. Amazing woman, just truly. And then I have to say, part of this, transformation of really wanting to lean in and working with women and the empowerment of women is Jackie Canny, who was the chief people officer at Walmart, and who I had the opportunity to be the chief of staff with and followed to WPP. And she really was fantastic in a very different way than the male leaders, and gave me a lot of, candidly, she gave me a lot of rope to go do things. And I just would always be like, "Are you sure? Are you sure? Like, yeah, go." Right. So it's really, so I have had, some fantastic women leaders too. But yeah, it's interesting. I have to say, ladies, what I think is so impressive about what you're doing is you're bringing women from different walks of life, right? Because one of the things that I think, I'm part of, various different women networks. And I think sometimes, you get into these core groups, right? You get into all these different groups. I think sometimes, right, it's okay, well, it's these type of women, it's these type of women, it's these type of women. And I think what I love, or what gravitates, I mean, I love it, but what gravitates to what you're doing is you're thinking across sections, across industries, across different types of experiences. Because that's where I think that's the secret sauce for us as women. Is not, I'm going to make this up, but women that are all in finance, or women that are all in tech, or women. The secret sauce for us is to create partnerships across industry, across public-private partnership, right? Even socioeconomic. Like, we just need to break down the boundaries,
right,
and come together. So I just wanted to say thank you guys for doing that, because that's just so important, and not enough organizations are doing that.
I appreciate you seeing that, and I really appreciate you saying it. But I really want to know about this company you're starting that we keep referring to. What is
Okay.
it?
I know. So it's called Include, and it is a small women-owned business. And we have collectively over 100 years of experience across the federal government and the private sector. And we've created 3 lines of business. One that will be traditional business consulting, so strategy and reputation, people and culture. We'll also, we have some technology experts in cybersecurity. So we'll be servicing, whether it's Fortune 500, small businesses, startups, et cetera. And then another part of the business, which I'm really excited about, is government contracting. So part of what we're doing is we're diving in and we're figuring out how can we bring our consulting services to the government. And so that's something that's a little bit longer of a process. And it's this very kind of, most people say, oh, government contracting, and think it's bureaucratic and all. Yes. Is it challenging? But it's really exciting because it allows you to serve the mission in a different way for the government. And then the final line of business that we're creating, which is something for another time, but is actually a product business where we will sell product to the government. So that's going to be a longer lead. But we realized the most important part of why we were creating these 3 lines of business was we wanted to be a platform for women. And we wanted to be a platform for women to come together as a consortium to understand that the power was in partnership, right? A lot of people decide to put out a shingle. They try and do this, that, the other thing, but it's really hard and it's really expensive. Mm-hmm. And so what we've done is we've brought together like-minded women from different industries, from different expertise, different functions. And we've said, look, let's create together, not alone. Let's be able to, for example, these government contracts, let's go after these contracts because you know what, together, we actually have the qualifications to do all of the things versus if I just went and wanted to do one thing, that's all I could do. And meanwhile, what we can do is we can do it cost efficiently, not only for ourselves as an organization, but for the client, which then allows us to be, efficient in that we're growing our wealth, right? We're growing our wealth for each other and our company. And then we're also better serving clients. I imagine you all have talked a lot to people about there's new trends, right? Whether it's fractional, hourly, this idea of retainer and full-time, it's changing, right? And so that's with our model. It's fantastic because a lot of the women that are part of our consortium, they have other things they want to do, right? They want to go be a mom, or they need to go be a caregiver, or they need to go, one of my partners is a horseback rider, right? I'm a horseback rider too. She, wants to go eventing, right? So we're meeting ourselves where we need to be, and we're meeting our clients where they are. So it's this new type of model. And I know some people don't like partnerships, but I love them. I hug them. I think that they're the best thing. And so we're going to be based here in the DMV area. So we're very excited. And, look, we're open for business. I think one of the things that's different is as we're approaching this is that we want to solve people's problems, right? And I think too often people will say, well, they need to do what I tell them to do, right? I need to sell them what I've got. And I've really taken a different approach. I'm like, what problem do you have, or what work won't people do for you that you need to get done? And I was like, okay, I'll go do that. So that's a little bit about us. And I just want to give a big hats off to my business partner, Patricia Borey, who she began Include 7 years ago. Oh, wow. And she started as a DE&I training and inclusive coach. And then we've just evolved, and really become, instead of just an individual focused company, we've become this consortium, and we're excited.
So how can people find you, Katie?
You can find us at includellc.com. Okay. And you can find us on LinkedIn as well as Include. And we're going to be, knocking on people's doors come this week when we launch. And, look, we're here to support. And I also have to say, one of the things that's really interesting is we can do things differently as women. And I think that is something that now, having spent the first part of my career working with primarily men and in male dominated, I'm now leaning in the complete opposite. And I want the next 20 years to be with this group and this consortium of women, right? And not that men won't be allies and it's fantastic and we have, but that's what I want to do because, candidly, to go back to where we begin the conversation, I want Kamala and I want other, my goddaughters, I have 2 goddaughters. I want them to, exactly say what Kamala, should I be president or should I be governor? Right.
Do I wear pink or do I wear purple?
Right.
I just don't know.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
Or do I wear whatever,
Yes. I mean, but it should be just like that. And that's what companies like yours will empower women to be able to do. I think it's brilliant. I think it's fabulous. I'm so excited about it. Thank you so much for doing it. Thank you for having the vision and then breaking through the fears to make it forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you, ladies, for what you're doing. You're breaking your own ceilings.
We just enjoy talking. It's just,
we talk a lot, but we're cheering you on, Katie. And thank you for the vulnerability and some of the stories you shared about how you got here. And I know your story will be resonant with so many of our listeners, and your story will have an impact beyond today. So thank you for sharing it.
Because
thank you, ladies.
We only succeed through others. So thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Well, and good luck with everything. And good luck, because I know you have your October conference. So I would love to come if I could. Yes. So
shameless promo. If you haven't registered for the PowerWomen Retreat, get to the website and make it happen. The deadline didn't pass, right? Claire, folks can still register.
No, you can still register. It's thepowerwomen.org. And if you need to donate or sponsor another woman who's not able to attend, we have a lot of women interested who have not been able to financially attend themselves, as well as a lot of nonprofit directors that's not in their budget. We'd really, really love to be able to send them. So please visit.
October 3rd and 4th, 4th and 5th.
October 4th through 6th.
There it is, 4th through 6th, first weekend of October.
Yeah.
Make it happen, ladies. Invest in yourself. You're worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. If you like the show, please rate and review on iTunes and check out our website, thepowerwomen.org.